Following an 8-month recovery from an injury that threatened to derail her momentum, Caitlin Clark did not return to the public eye with the typical humility of an athlete finding their footing. Instead, during a national broadcast, she sat alongside 3 of the NBA's most prolific scorers and indicated that the era of players being simply grateful for visibility had concluded. Her approach was calculated, signaling a shift in the WNBA's direction before many realized the previous standards were being discarded. Her public presence has occasionally shifted toward the unconventional. During a game against the Pacers, Clark was seen on the baseline wearing a media vest, operating a large telephoto lens as a photographer. LeBron James, focused on the game, did not acknowledge her, even as she attempted to capture the shot. This moment highlighted a lack of ego, showing a player who remains a student of the game's history while simultaneously becoming its most discussed figure. On a recent NBC broadcast with Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter, and Tracy McGrady, the dynamic was one of professional parody. This stood in contrast to earlier commentary from Reggie Miller, who had compared Clark's playing style to that of reserve guard Peyton Pritchard. While Pritchard is a respected role player, the comparison was widely criticized by analysts as a mischaracterization of Clark's impact. Clark did not address the comparison directly, maintaining a composure that suggests a clear understanding of her own influence on the sport. The conversation eventually turned toward the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement. Historically, these negotiations were characterized by internal friction and limited gains for many players. However, Clark's commercial reach has altered the league's economic reality. Her public insistence on higher standards influenced the valuation of the product on the floor. The resulting figures include a $7 million salary cap and supermax contracts exceeding $1 million, alongside a revenue-sharing model that treats players as legitimate partners. Beyond the financials, Clark emphasized the effort behind the deal, noting the extensive negotiations and the impact on future generations. She described a league that is no longer a secondary career path requiring athletes to play in Russia or Turkey for financial stability. With expansion into Toronto and Portland, the number of roster spots is set to increase from 144 to over 170, allowing more domestic talent to remain in the US and raising the overall level of competition. The weight of her recent statements is grounded in her 230-day absence. In 2025, a right groin injury sidelined Clark, leading to speculation regarding her return to form. She answered those questions during the World Cup qualifiers in Puerto Rico. Despite a modest stat line of 11 points and 6 assists per game, she led the tournament in assists and was named MVP. Her statement that she finally felt like herself serves as a baseline for her 2026 expectations. Her analysis extends to the NBA as well. She recently identified Nikola Jokic as the best player in the world, specifically highlighting his ability to control a game through floor spacing and playmaking rather than high-volume shooting. While Jokic joked that the compliment was tied to their shared agent, Clark's technical breakdown of his game demonstrated a basketball IQ that matches the veterans she was seated with. Clark's final declaration was devoid of typical athletic hedging. She stated that the Indiana Fever, a team that has not reached the finals since 2015, are the favorites to win the 2026 championship. She has already begun advocating for roster stability, specifically the re-signing of Kelsey Mitchell as an essential partner. By embracing this level of scrutiny, Clark is moving the Fever past the developmental phase and into a championship window. For the rest of the league, her performance in Puerto Rico was a precursor to a season where her physical health and her influence on the front office converge. The challenge for the WNBA in 2026 will be responding to a player who has spent her time away from the court preparing to dominate it. The focus on 2026 is not merely a reflection of Clark's personal ambitions, but a calculated assessment of the Indiana Fever's roster construction. While Clark is the primary engine of the offense, the continuity of the core lineup is the structural foundation for her championship claim. The dynamic between Clark and Kelsey Mitchell has evolved from a backcourt experiment into a high-efficiency offensive system. Mitchell's ability to score at all 3 levels forces defenses into impossible choices. They cannot consistently double-team Clark without leaving one of the league's most consistent perimeter threats open. The statistical evidence from the latter half of the previous season indicated that when Mitchell and Clark were on the floor together, the Fever's offensive rating climbed to the top of the league. Retaining Mitchell was a requirement because her speed and veteran composure provide the necessary relief for Clark when opposing guards attempt to initiate full-court pressure. Beyond the backcourt, the development of Aaliyah Boston remains the critical variable in Indiana's interior dominance. Boston's role has transitioned from a traditional post player to a versatile playmaker who facilitates from the high post. This shift allows Clark to operate off-ball, utilizing screens to find open looks while Boston reads the defensive rotations. In the 2025 qualifiers, Clark's willingness to move without the ball demonstrated a tactical maturation. She is no longer just a high-usage ball handler. She has become a gravitational force that creates space for others. This internal chemistry is why the organization prioritized roster stability over flashy free agent acquisitions during the offseason. They are betting on the exponential growth of a young core that has finally had a full training cycle to integrate their skill sets. This stability is mirrored by the league's logistical evolution. The 2026 season marks a definitive departure from the austerity that once defined the WNBA. The move to full-time charter flights, a direct result of increased revenue and player advocacy, has fundamentally changed the recovery window for athletes. For a player like Clark, whose physical workload is among the highest in the sport, the elimination of commercial travel fatigue is a performance multiplier. The infrastructure of the league now supports the professional standards Clark and her peers demanded. Practice facilities have seen significant upgrades, with the Fever benefiting from a dedicated environment that rivals many NBA programs. These are the hidden factors that contribute to a championship run: the ability to maintain peak physical condition over a grueling 40-game schedule. The economic implications of this growth are visible in the league's new television rights agreements. Analysts have noted that the Clark effect led to a 300% increase in national broadcast slots for the Fever. This visibility has created a feedback loop where higher ratings justify higher ad rates, which in turn fuels the salary cap increases seen in the new CBA. The league is no longer operating on a model of subsidized growth. It is now a self-sustaining commercial entity. The revenue sharing mentioned in Clark's NBC interview is a structural shift that ensures players benefit directly from the league's popularity. It transforms the relationship between the front office and the roster from one of management and labor to a genuine partnership. The expansion into Toronto and Portland is the next logical step in this progression. These markets were selected not just for their size, but for their demonstrated appetite for women's basketball. The Toronto market, in particular, offers a gateway to international sponsorship opportunities that were previously untapped. As the league expands to 13 and then 14 teams, the scarcity of roster spots will begin to ease, but the competition for those spots will intensify. The influx of international talent, drawn by the new salary structures, means the WNBA is becoming the undisputed destination for the world's best players. Clark's MVP performance in Puerto Rico was a reminder that the talent gap is closing globally, and the WNBA is the primary beneficiary of that rising tide. Tactically, the rest of the league has spent the offseason developing Clark-specific defensive schemes. We have seen teams experiment with box-and-one variations and aggressive hedging on high pick-and-rolls. However, Clark's ability to pass over the top of defenses renders many of these traditional strategies ineffective. Her vision allows her to exploit the smallest lapses in defensive communication. In 2026, the league will likely see more physical, bump-and-run coverage designed to disrupt her rhythm. Clark's response has been a dedicated strength and conditioning program during her recovery period. She has added lean muscle to her frame, specifically to handle the physicality of defenders who will try to push her off her spots. This physical evolution is as important as her shooting range. It allows her to finish at the rim through contact, adding another dimension to her scoring profile. The mental aspect of her return cannot be overlooked. 8 months away from competition provides a rare opportunity for self-reflection and film study. While sidelined, Clark was observed during Fever home games taking meticulous notes, often engaging in deep technical discussions with the coaching staff. This period of forced observation has likely sharpened her understanding of league-wide tendencies. When she speaks about the Indiana Fever being the favorites, it isn't an emotional outburst. It's a conclusion drawn from months of analyzing her team's potential versus the rest of the field. She sees a league that is talented, but perhaps not as unified in its championship pursuit as the group currently assembling in Indianapolis. The pressure of these expectations is something Clark has navigated since her collegiate days, but the professional stakes are higher. In Indiana, she isn't just playing for a title. She is carrying the economic weight of a franchise and a city's sporting identity. The Gainbridge Fieldhouse has become a hub for a new generation of fans, many of whom are following the WNBA for the first time because of her. This influx of support has created a home court advantage that the Fever haven't enjoyed in a decade. The energy in the building during Clark's rookie season was a precursor to what is expected in 2026. Sellout crowds are no longer an anomaly, they are the baseline. This atmosphere places a different kind of pressure on opposing teams, who must now contend with a hostile environment that rewards every Indiana run with deafening momentum. Looking at the broader landscape, the 2026 season will also be a test of the league's depth. With expansion on the horizon, established teams must decide whether to protect their veterans or gamble on younger prospects in the expansion draft. The Fever, with their young core, are in a unique position of strength. They have already secured their foundational pieces, allowing them to focus on scouting specialized role players who can fill specific gaps in their rotation. The scouting department has been tasked with finding high IQ defenders who can complement Clark's offensive output. The goal is to build a roster that doesn't just win games when Clark is scoring 30 points, but one that can grind out victories when her shot isn't falling. As training camp approaches in April, the narrative will inevitably center on Clark's health. The right groin injury is a notoriously difficult ailment for basketball players, as it impacts lateral movement and explosive drives to the basket. However, her performance in the World Cup qualifiers suggested that the rehabilitation was not only successful, but perhaps corrective of previous mechanical inefficiencies. Her shooting motion looked more fluid, and her first step appeared as quick as it was before the layoff. The medical staff in Indiana has been conservative with her return-to-play protocol, ensuring that she enters the 2026 season without any lingering restrictions. This patience is a luxury afforded by the off-season calendar, and it may be the deciding factor in her longevity. The championship warning Clark issued was also a message to the veterans of the league. Players like Aja Wilson and Breanna Stewart have defined the WNBA for the last several years, and they are unlikely to cede their positions without a fight. The clash between the established elite and the Clark-led Fever will be the primary storyline of the year. It's a transition of power that usually takes years, but Clark is attempting to accelerate the timeline. Her respect for the legends of the game is clear, but her competitive drive doesn't allow for deference on the court. She is looking to prove that the new era of the WNBA isn't coming in the future, it has already arrived. The final component of the 2026 season is the cultural shift within the Indiana organization itself. Under new leadership, and with Clark as the focal point, the Fever have adopted a championship or bust mentality that hasn't been present for years. The front office has been aggressive in providing the resources necessary for success, from advanced analytics departments to specialized skills coaches. This professionalization of every facet of the team reflects Clark's own approach to the game. She expects excellence from everyone around her, and her presence has raised the standard for the entire organization. When she walked off that NBC set, she wasn't just a player who had finished an interview. She was a leader who had set a public benchmark for her team, her league, and herself. The 2026 season is the platform where she will either validate that confidence or face the reality of a league that is more competitive than ever. But if her history is any indication, Clark is at her best when the stakes are highest and the world is watching. The era of potential is over. The era of results has begun.